Yes, Melissa. Hello, my
Hey,
dear. I don't want to waste time. I want to talk to you. So that's fine. Because it will be up and people can look at it at their leisure afterwards. I just want to have this conversation with you. And hopefully people can, yeah, people will join as yet. See, they're all coming now. I would imagine just like me, they've quickly finished their dinner. And it was a nice dinner cooked by me. I had to speed through it.
I hope they don't get indigestion or because
Oh,
of
Lord.
us.
Listen, I've got my sparkling water with me. Well, look, I'm going to say hello to everyone again. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our second Black Food Love Valentine special for the Black Love Project. My name is Joy Francis, and I'm co-founder of the Black Love Project and also executive director of Words of Colour Productions. And I think it's a no-brainer why we picked this topic under Black Love. Food is all for me, alongside music, of course. It speaks for you when words fail you. It comforts you when you're feeling high and low. It's part of our identity across the Black spectrum culturally. It's part of our identity, one for which we have to fight for still as our food, and ways are culturally appropriated without our consent. And so today, I will be chewing the fat with Melissa Thompson. Melissa is a journalist, an award-winning food writer and cook who started a supper club in her front room in 2014. 7 years later, she won the Guild of Food Writers Food Writing Award, that's a mouthful, Melissa, and runs the food and recipe project Foul Mouths, and her debut cookbook, Motherland, The Journey of Jamaican Food, is out in September. We'll talk a bit more about that, and it's published by Bloomsbury. Welcome, Melissa.
Welcome, thank you, Joy. Thank you for having me.
Oh no, listen, I mean, you know, we've got to declare, we go way, way back when you were, you know, I'm so excited about this because, you know, you were a journalist on the Mirror, amongst others, and, you know, and you now have a whole different life and expressing a whole different passion. So how did the transition from writing about showbiz and human interest stories to being an award-winning food writer and cook?
Well, I mean, you know, Joy, I mean, I think you've done yourself a disservice because you haven't, you know, the reason I got into journalism, the reason I got a foot in was because of you and the internship that you arranged, the scheme, and
Yes,
Creative Collective scheme.
Creative Collective, yeah. Another lifetime ago, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, we were babies, and so that was, yeah, more than 20 years ago. No, just under 20 years ago. And
Yeah.
And so I started out on the big issue at university, and I was dotting at university, and I saw this internship come up, and I was like, I want that. I didn't know anything about journalism. Went to that internship. It was paid. Had the best 3 months like ever. It was amazing. And then I you know, that helped me get. I started off on work experience on a local paper after that, and then I managed to turn that into a job. They got people to interview for the role I was doing on work experience. They wanted someone with more experience, but I managed to kind of sneak in there and keep the job, and then ended up on the Mirror, like you say, sort of via a news agency. And I loved it at first. It was amazing on the Mirror. And then you kind of like I became a bit disillusioned because you sort of think the Mirror, it's like a left-leaning paper. It's not the same as the others, and actually they're kind of all the same. And so I became very disillusioned, and so I set up this supper club, and that was just kind of, I think, like a release, you know, something that was my own thing. It was completely separate to my job. When you're a journalist on like a national newspaper, right, they want you to be completely wedded to what you're doing, and not to have any other interest. Like your sole interest has to be journalism, and that just wasn't the case for me. So I started off this supper club, and then that grew, and then I left the Mirror in 2015, and then I was doing like pop-ups and residencies for a couple of years. Then I got pregnant, and like being in the kitchen and being pregnant isn't wrong. So it was a bit much. And so then I left, and I was sort of doing like a lot of kind of social media support for businesses and stuff like that. And then and I had tried to get into food journalism, but it's quite like a tight clique. It's quite difficult to get a foot in, and it's quite difficult to know like who to contact. How like now that I'm in the world, I understand how it works. And beforehand, I just didn't know. It's really hard to penetrate. And then George Floyd got murdered, and obviously that kind of changed things. And And then I had an approach from, I started speaking out because I was just like, you know, it really annoyed me how everyone was reacting, how white people were reacting to the murder of George Floyd. It was like, oh my God, so this racism thing that you speak of is like, it's true. And it's just like, you know, what have we been talking about for so long? And so I started, and just like, I was sort of like speaking about, you know, other black and like sort of black chefs and black cooks and other cooks of colour. And then BBC Good Food saw what I was doing and approached me to write a column for them because they, you know, their magazine was lacking in kind of diverse, you know, diverse voices. And I think this is the crux of the matter, right? Because food celebrates like the world, and yet, you know, the people getting to talk about it, like food from whether it's like sort of, you know, like Southeast Asia or like East Asia kind of, and like not so much, I don't think so. I mean, well, I guess like a lot of sort of South African, you know, food, but basically the people who have prominence tend to be white, you know, and there's such colour privilege in the telling of food stories, and so they realised that needed to be redressed, and so then I started doing that, and then just kind of, and in a way it's quite annoying because how that changes the perception. Suddenly people start to take notice of you, like in the world, right, the food world. And it's like, yeah, I haven't changed. I didn't wake up with the ability to write about food. Like, that's always existed in me. It's just I wasn't able to ever get a foot in. And so now that I'm here, like, what is really important to me is trying to elevate other people and trying to get them, because there are so many people there who are brilliant storytellers, brilliant cooks, and brilliant chefs. And it's just like, and it's almost like there has to be this intrigue around food to make it kind of, you know, like, and food writing. And it's like, actually, that it makes it quite boring and quite inward looking, and what we need is to have diverse voices. Like, I love hearing about people's stories. I love hearing about their relationship with food and the dishes they grew up on and what those dishes remind them of. And you only get that from the horse's mouth. You don't get it from someone who's like been to a country on holiday and then wants to come and recreate the food. You don't get that. Like, yeah, sometimes they have a valid story, but actually it's kind of like, it's how, you know, how that food has built us, and that's what I want to hear.
It's interesting you saying that, because this is a question I was going to ask you later on, but I want to bring it sort of to the foreground, because some of the people you're talking about fall into the category of our parents and grandparents. Because my mum is 81, and I was exposed to sushi and Jamaican, exposed to sushi in the 70s. You know what I mean? We just saw something look like a dead fish because she got this book. She was an area manager for Avon, one of the first black area managers for Avon. And so when she did really well, you know, she'd get a gift or a prize or whatever. And then she had a trip, but she got this cookery book that had dishes from around the world. And she was convinced every Friday we're trying something different. And then now, fast forward, you know, she's someone who is, you know, looks at Nigel Slater, and she go around and she goes, I've done this soup, you know, winter soup with chestnuts and pomegranate, and she's done a coffee and organic coffee, let me get it right, and chocolate and beetroot cake. Oh my God. And she does it so beautifully and so well. You know, there's a vocation, there's a love there. We'll talk about, you know, the role it plays in our cultures, and she taught my dad, who couldn't cook. He burnt fried eggs, and now he's cooking lamb neck stew at 89. Amazing. You know, these are the stories that we would lose, you know, and I want to talk about, you know, the sort of whole cultural hierarchy around food as well. But for me, there's someone like now, I'm thinking I have to do an oral history with her, because where these recipes going to go, because she always puts a twist on it. She's and she bakes. She's baking whole wheat bread, and I saw a pressure cooker and I didn't know what the hell it was. Again, four decades ago, and yet it was acting like it's new. But let's not get into that just yet. I mean, you know, and so I want to talk a bit about, I mean, the role saying that now, you know, when really, you know, she's knackered. She was knackered during COVID, saying, I'm bored with cooking for a bit. She took some time out and my dad took over, and now she's cooking vegan. So there is a role or roles that food plays in black cultures, be it Caribbean, African, you know, the nurturing, the connection to our past, healing. I think also the emotion, you know, the fact that it's a way for us to communicate that we love you. Even like it can be a bit pressured. You know, what's your take on that and your experience of that?
Yeah, I think food, especially in my, growing up for me, has always been a language of love, and not that my parents weren't kind of able to express that just by saying it, or kind of, but I think for I mean, like, it's like going out at night. Like I went away for secondary school. First thing I do when I walk through the door is dump my bags, go straight to the fridge, and see what the leftovers were, because there'll always be some sort of leftovers. And then, when I was, and then this makes me laugh, because obviously everyone, having trained, done my sort of food hygiene and everything, it's like rice, how dangerous rice is. And like, when I learned this, I was like, what? You're not meant to hold rice at temperature, because when I was like, we lived in this house. It had had an Arga. I didn't know what an Arga was until we kind of moved into this house in Weymouth. And I like, like it stays warm, right? And so I'd go out to the pub, and I'd come back quite late at night, and there'd be like a curry or something, like curry chicken or something, or like sort of like curry goat. And it would just be like kept warm with the rice, not warm enough that you could heat it. I'd have to still kind of eat it in the microwave. And it would just been sitting there for hours, and I'd get home late, put it in the microwave. And that was just my dad being like, there you go, Melissa, like, kind of get this down your neck, and your head won't be as sore in the morning. And now, as a parent, I've got a 4-year-old daughter, and to be able to cook for her, and like, she loves planting, and and she'll be like, can I have all the plantain? And because she's like, because I really like it, and I end up just giving it to her. Like, I'll have 2 pieces, and I give her the rest of it. And it's just I don't know, like, when someone, it's like you're feeding them, and you are nurturing them, and it's like, this is, I'm building you up, and I'm making you happy, and it's like, I'm letting you know that that I love you. And I think, especially for sort of like, for like, in certainly in my culture, and I think and kind of in Black culture, and I think, well when you are, like, I'm of kind of dual heritage, and so, like, my background is in various places. I'm like, and like, for me to be able to cook the food of Jamaica, where my dad comes from, and even Malta, like, so I grow like arabali, which is round courgettes, which is like a Maltese dish, and you sort of stuff them with the ragu. And and you're cooking them, and it's just, and that's just such a connection. And food has always been used as a connection, right? Like, Jamaica is a testament to that, because it is food that has, the earliest settlers kind of the Taino kind of brought, like, sort of root crops from South America. The Spanish brought over loads of animals, and when they colonized the island, and then the sort of the where people from West Africa kind of brought it, like, traditions, and brought so many, like, like ackee and yam and things like that, and plantain, and it's like having that connection to a place, like, and that familiarity, and some of it obviously was practical, because I guess it's just food that doesn't need too much thinking about. But it's just like, I mean, food is so much more than just the act of eating, or just the act of, like, being full, or kind of any sustenance. It's yeah. It's
I mean, when we were speaking before, this today, I was just through the conversation, and what struck me was the fact that, in a way, there is an over-reliance on food to some degree, because of what was taken away from us through enslavement. And, when you're constantly dealing with loss, and the only thing, and also the fact that your voice is being neutered, food then takes on, it's almost like code, isn't it? So, because it's something you can express, it's unspoken. You had to be fed to be able to go back in the fields and pick the cotton. So that was the only place you could be creative. That was the only place that you could express your nurturing skills, and care. For me, that's what it feels like. And I think that's why, because obviously, within Jewish culture, other cultures, food is really prominent. I think, though, in terms of our experience, our ancestry and the experiences, it's beyond political for us, food, I think.
Yeah,
anyway,
I mean, if you look, I think some of in Jamaican food, I mean, some of the, like your rice and peas, and sort of different stews and things like that they were made. I mean, like, ackee and saltfish, or like, sort of rundown and things like that, and dishes that were made, like sort of the like, we kind of think about like saltfish now, and it's kind of, oh, like lovely saltfish. And back in the day, what, you know, like the West Indian cure was the worst of the saltfish. And then, you know, but you kind of add it with some like coconut milk, and you cook it down, and you add some vegetables in there, and suddenly, you know, you've got something that's quite tasty. And that the fact that that is still in existence today is such an important legacy. And you've got, yeah, like ackee and saltfish. I mean, you know, these two things that suddenly got put together, so much more than the sum of their, you know, so much greater than the sum of their parts. I always forget how to say that expression properly, but do you know what I mean? It's like it's so like it's just, I think within sort of Jamaican food, especially you've got like sort of resilience. You've got just I don't know, like absolute sort of wisdom passed down through it. How we're going to take something that isn't the prime cut, or it's not the best, and just, you know, make something delicious out of it. And we spoke about bami the other day, and bami, you know, kind of the like cassava flatbreads that were the indigenous Taino kind of sort of made them, and they're amazing because they could last for up to a year, right? So that's how they kind of explored, because they had food to take with them. So if they and that was kind of like unheard of, something that would last for that long. And then, you know, they even fed Columbus and his crew when he got shipwrecked. I mean, sort of wish that they hadn't bothered, but you know, they were nice people, and they still exist today, and that blows my mind. Like when I went to Jamaica last time, I went to this place out in Pepper in St. Elizabeth. It's called Pepper because pimento grow like sort of, you know, I don't think it grows as prominently. And obviously, like a lot of bami gets made in factories, so you get these like perfect discs. And I went to this place that kind of, it's a lot more basic, and it's just like, and watching the whole process, like it was quite emotional, because obviously they've got gas, and they've got this kind of really sort of basic grater that grates the cassava. But in principle, like it's exactly the same as the Taino would have done it, and nothing gets wasted. So you've got like the starch water that goes to that goes to Red Stripe to brew beer. You've got the powder that goes for starching like your clothes and stuff like that. That gets, you know, sold to the peel gets fed to pigs, and it's just like nothing gets wasted. And this thing, and I was just like, yeah, it's like sort of 600 years plus since kind of the kind of, well, I'll say our ancestors, even though like, you know, actually kind of like I don't know, I doubt I've got any Taino blood in me. Because sort of my makeup is kind of like West African and Maltese, but you know, some Taino survived, like kind of a massacre from the Spanish, and I think we don't know anything about them really. We know very little about what was left over, but we have these breads that you know, that is like, imagine if someone like a Taino person came like landed like in Jamaica today, they'd be like what's going on? But it's like, it's all right, man, have a bami, right? There's a bit of familiarity for you.
It's funny, Karengabe, who's joined us. Hi, Karen. Said about, yeah, all the high-end fishmongers are now selling saltfish. I said, yeah, but they call it salted cod. Yes. So, you know, and the language is very, very important here, isn't it? About how, you know, like, you know, nose to tail. And yet we, you know, I mean, I hated tripe, but, you know, all those things, you know, nothing, like you said, nothing was wasted. My mum planted every seed from everything. So we had tomatoes, and so the whole thing about veganism, the whole thing about sustainability, it was part of our lives. And I'm 56, it's part of our lives all my life, you know, and making mulch for the garden, as we call it. Yeah. So, and now that's all a big deal, and people making millions from it. And it was something we just did as a matter of course. Yes. And coming from a culture which is sort of very asset based. So it's like, oh, you know, I cook this, or I've got this, you can do this, or this is how you plant it in the garden. My mum's not a natural, was never trained in terms of as a cook or as a gardener. And yet we had a mini allotment in our back garden. You know, when she went to Enfield, she won Enfield in Bloom, along with my dad, you know, for 3 years. Okay. So those sort of things, it shows you, but again, it's about how these things are chronicled or not. And I want to just quickly, before moving on to cultural appropriation and the whole thing about language and framing. I mean, you talked about your parents being feeders, you know, and drowning in food, which influenced you. I mean, you know, your dad gave you a hangover cure, you know, when you came in. But yeah, can you say a bit more about that? Because I think that will resonate with a lot of people, you know, like, you know, and about how emotional it is if you don't eat the food. You know, you used to wonder, why did my parents just get upset? I just left a little bit, eat all of it. It's almost like something's going to happen, and you know, at least it will sustain you for 5 days if something happens. I don't know. But yeah. But you use the word feeders, so yeah. If you explain a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think like both of my parents kind of grew up in quite poor, with quite sort of like poor backgrounds, and so my mum, and like, and I see it today, like still they hate wasting things, and I think, and actually with the kind of a lot of the dialogue at the moment about like sort of reducing food waste and things like that, it's really tricky. But then there's also, like, you know, you're getting told different things. It's like cut down food waste, but also don't feel you have to finish what's on your plate, because that's like, yeah, that's kind of why people are kind of getting increasingly like unhealthy, and so as a kid, like my parents would just like, they would put something on my plate, whether I liked it or not, and I'd have to finish it, and then that was like growing up. It was really kind of like problematic. Like, I would sit at the table for hours. They used to call me the hamster, because if I didn't like something, I'd keep putting it in my mouth and just chewing it, and my cheeks would go bigger and bigger because I couldn't swallow it. And then as I got older, like now, you know, like my dad's like sort of the other week, I had to go to like do some babysitting, and we got back to, we're staying with my parents. We got back late, and I was like, all right, we really need to hurry up. And Dad's sort of like doing it, and I went in the kitchen. Kate was like, my partner was like, no, don't go. You're going to stress him out. And I was like, but I need to kind of like, you know, like get things moving. And Dad was about to plate up. He'd made katsu curry. And he wanted to plate up the rice, but put it into like a little ramekin and then turn it out. So look, and I was like, and it's like, and this is just like, you know, he wants to like present this even though I'm really late. He wants to present, and I was like, Dad, we haven't got time for that. Like, let's just put it on the plate. And you can see that it actually pained him a little bit to have to like to see his kind of what would have been a beautiful plate, kind of get sort of thrown on it. But yeah, like that is just like they are proper feeders. And if they come into my house, I have to tell them, like, don't bring any food. Like, they came last weekend, and I was like, don't bring any food, because otherwise they'll just bring food. And even when they were there, like, I can't believe we didn't bring you anything. And it's like, no, that's good.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you know, I just think it's so funny, isn't it? I think there is definitely something in it. I don't know if you remember, what's his name? Hugh Fernley Whittenstall, when he used to go around people's homes. And you know, you saw this, you know, white chef in a West African woman's home or a Greek Cypriot person's home, and I think we need something with almost like the sort of like hidden chefs and cooks that are out there of a particular generation who could tell us a thing or two. Do you know what I mean? Especially like the importance of turmeric, you know, and the fact that you know, that a lot of the stuff that we use in our foods we can use for our health and well-being. I mean, you say
people have been enjoying turmeric before turmeric lattes.
Enough said. You said part of the problem is how food is framed in the West. You know, aspirational things like, you know, the language. You know, especially heavy French leaning. You know, Juliet. Vegetables, you know, the overuse of butter, as far as I'm concerned, to compensate for seasoning, and egos galore. I mean, you know, which I suppose on one level, from my point of view, is part of the reason why the hospitality sector has such a problem attracting staff, you know, and retaining staff, because of this sort of inequity, really, in not just in terms of payment, but the egos and the pressure to conform to a particular viewpoint of what makes good food. It's like Becky with the good hair, exactly. But food version. Yeah, you know, what? Yeah, expand on that. You know, what concerns you about that, and where can we slip in?
Well, I mean, I know this wasn't done by design, but it's quite good that we're having this conversation today when the Michelin guide has been revealed, and you know, which restaurants have been given a star. And that kind of like that whole system for me seems really colonial, and it's the way that for so long, you know, the restaurants, like I hated it just in sort of general language, how Michelin is kind of is spoken about as the pinnacle of food. And you know, because I've been to Michelin starred restaurants, and sort of back in the day before we had children, especially, it'd be like, oh, we're going somewhere abroad, and we'll look in the area and we'll see ourselves to a nice Michelin starred dinner, and it's almost like a bit sort of like the what's this, like the clothing, the person who's what's that the expression? Yeah, you know, the guy who's walking around naked.
Oh, the emperor. The
The
Emperor with
Emperor's
no
New Clothes. Thank you, Joy. Honestly,
yeah,
like,
no problem.
it's late in the day, my brain's not
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
And it's all, and everyone's like, oh, you know, this is amazing. And don't get me wrong, the food is great. Like technically, it's great, but it's not the sort of food that when I'm like, you know, on my deathbed, I'm like, oh God, I wish I could have that kind of like pea done 3 ways. You know, like once more before I broke it. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's not like that. That like it's just like that for me. It isn't like it's like I don't aspire to eat that sort of food. It's not the sort of food that kind of that speaks to me, and it's not, and it bothers me that this is seen as like the best kind of food that you can get, because and fine if it was alongside other examples of what is excellent food, but it kind of dominates, and it's really exclusive, and it excludes, and now I'm sure, you know, that they have probably tried to make a bit of an effort to make it a bit more inclusive, but I'd be very interested to see who runs the whole kind of Michelin operation, and you know, like, and all the language around food. And it's quite funny because when we mentioned my book in the beginning, and on the photo shoot, my one of my friends, Melek, she was doing she was sort of assisting with kind of sort of the home ec, and you know, making the dishes and styling them, and we were just joking about kind of because she was making coleslaw, and then she was like, yeah, I'm just julienne, she's Kurdish, and we were just like laughing, like, where does this come from, this language, like julienne, and kind of like, you know, like all of it, saute, and also like that acts as a barrier to people wanting to like to even, like, you know, pick up a pan, because it's like, what does it mean, like, and I think like Ruby Tando's spoken about this, about the language, and how like, you know, we just take it for granted, and it's like no, I'm not julienning this carrot, I'm cutting it into matchsticks, right? Yeah, that's what I'm doing, and even as a food writer now, kind of sometimes because it's so ingrained, right? Like it's not just me like sitting here like preaching like, you like, thou like shall not do this. Like I'm trying to undo like kind of, you know, a lifetime's worth of colonial kind of like influence on food and everything else.
Well, the thing is, well, it's funny because I hear you, because for one of the biggest things when I go abroad, I go to countries because of their food history. And, you know, when you eat, I like eat my way around Thailand, and you go to the, you know, street food, and you speak to them about, and you feel the passion, and you see it, and the exquisiteness of it. And you're not hearing that. You're hearing this. There's always a story behind a dish. There's always a story, a grandmother, a relative, somebody, something. And when they see that you appreciate the food, you know, they can't do enough for you, you know. And I think that's something that when you travel, it's funny because how food's been presented on TV. And if you look at which foods are the most popular, you know, if you look and see now, especially during COVID, there's been so many pop-ups for reflecting East Asian, South Asian, West African and so on food, because people think, you know what, I'm going to do what I'm passionate about. And there is a demand for it. You know, and for me, there's a hierarchy. I mean, and like you said as well, when we had the conversation around, you know, I'm an instinctive and intuitive cook. And actually, I don't always taste as I go along, to be honest. I don't, you know, and it still tastes good. You know, and I think that it puts pressure, it makes, but yeah, I noticed a lot of people are very nervous around cooking. I'd go to my friends' houses and say, oh, but she goes, no, you cook really good. No, you cook, I don't mind. And the fear around it. So you've got a lot of people that are not even engaging with that process because they feel that there's a standard to reach that they won't. So why even try, you know?
There's a lot of sort of smoke and mirrors, I think, kind of around the execution of food, around food writing, the whole arena. And actually, it's not, I mean, it's not easy, but, you know, kind of, I think we celebrate it for almost the wrong reasons, and we celebrate, you know, sort of things according to a structure that, as far as I'm concerned, is kind of like isn't relevant to the society that we live in.
But if you notice, I mean, I you know, it's funny, this whole, you know, debate about, you know, certain shows. There's a black person. I mean, I watch shows that are well done. Not all the shows have us in it. And one example of that, back in the early days, I've been watching MasterChef from more or less from the beginning. And, you know, I'd watch it and get frustrated. I'd watch it the next year. And it's been so good. And then, you know, they've got MasterChef, the professionals. And what I've noticed is, you know, all of us, and then Great British Menu, and the dual heritage chef who brought goat in and won with goat and was like rooting. It's taken, you know, how many decades. but you know, explained about goat and how important it is, and did really well with that dish. But you never saw it's only been the last, like, I'd say 5 or so years that we started to see like Ping when she won. We started to see East Asian, Greek, women and others, different types of food coming through and winning. And seeing that has just gladdened my heart, really, because there is this, you know, I always had this sense. I really want, I mean, there's been some in the professional side, but not so much on the amateur side, see Caribbean food and West African, East African food being championed, you know, because, I mean, if we're getting there, you're getting more and more, if you notice, more and more people from those backgrounds are actually getting through and are cooking on telly, so we're seeing them. But you could see for years there was just this, like, our food is just not good enough, you know. And when the chefs do come on, some of them say, you know, I'm doing elevated. That's another thing, elevated.
Oh my God,
elevated, yeah. Caribbean food, you know, so which means less for more money, you know. Yeah. And I think, you know, so you doing what you do and being visible is going to be really important to show that there is a career. If you've got a passion, same thing with in literature, similar issues, similar opaqueness in publishing. You know, about how they're, you know, same what you were saying about journalism, it's no different. I mean, you know, I want to talk about your book because, you know, Jamaican food history is really important, you know, so which history do we know about? And your book, Motherland, The Journey of Jamaican Food, is going to be published in September. And we're going to talk a bit about how you can pre-order, everyone. But explores the evolution of Jamaican food, you know, from the island's indigenous population to today. So what prompted you? Because I mean, the fact that, like you said, you got approached, you know, during lockdown, and we're coming up to the second, you know, anniversary of George Floyd's murder. And then all of a sudden these certain doors or discussions, doors were opening, certain discussions are being had. What prompted you to write this book? You know, and was it something you always had in mind, or did the opportunity come and then you rose to that?
I think, well, to be honest, like, I think I had contacted, I went to a supper club and I met a publisher, and I said, I actually put someone else forward to write a book. And then she was like, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I was like, well, yeah, I have, and I've had like different ideas kind of like sort of simmering in my mind. And then my agent got in touch with me because she'd seen my good food column. And oh, there's Angie, CC Scarlett in the message saying that she's looking, she's awesome. And my agent got in touch with me and was like, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I was like, yeah, I have. So I had a list of 3, and Motherland was on it. The scope was originally going to be a bit bigger. It was kind of like looking at sort of throughout the Caribbean. And then in fact, thank God I didn't do that, because actually, like, you know, I think almost that idea would have fed into the kind of narrative that the kind of Caribbean is kind of like, you know, the Caribbean, like Caribbean food can be summed up in one book. And actually, this is what, you know, like regionalization's happened in South Asia, it's happened in East Asia, and it's kind of getting a bit better. Like, people are realizing that, so like, you know, Chinese food isn't this kind of homogenous mass. Actually, it's got nuance and it's sort of regional diversity. And it's the same with Jamaican food. And then it kind of, like, the idea got more and more focused as sort of over the weeks. And I kept on trying to find this book. Like, I kept on ordering books that were, you know, because I found that I was cooking a lot more in lockdown, like a lot of us were. And actually, a lot of the food that I was craving was kind of like my heritage food. And I knew bits about some of it, but I wanted to know more. And actually, this book didn't exist, and it was amazing, because there were some things that I kind of knew. Like, I'd read that ackee seeds apparently enslaved people during the Middle Passage, or like before, you know, like kind of would wear necklaces made out of ackee seeds as kind of like talisman kind of thing, and that's how ackee got to Jamaica. But I mean, that's kind of one of the things put forward. There's like an official document or documentation of when ackee was officially recognised to have come into Jamaica. But people have to buy the book to find that out. And then it was like finding out more stuff and like reading these texts that were really that really old. Like, one of the frustrating things is that a lot of the research involves reading the words of white people, like the colonizers, because like the Spanish and then the British, because they were the people who had agency to be able to you know, to record what they were writing. I mean, like, sort of, you know, kind of the enslaved people weren't even like allowed to kind of learn to read and write.
Read
you
and
know?
write.
It was sort of, it was perceived to be dangerous, and so that's kind of like frustrating, and like, because I'd love to hear more, but there are sort of decent texts, and that was it really kind of, you know, and then the recipes are just kind of the classic recipes, and then also recipes that kind of, you know, kind of celebrate Jamaican like sort of fruit and vegetables and traditions and things like that, but kind of like my own recipes, and so it's kind of like a nice little mixture, really.
I mean, who taught you to cook?
I observe my dad a lot. Like I said, but my parents both are big cooks. My dad's a massive magpie, loves like cooking different dishes, and he was in the Navy, so travelled, you know, around a lot. And then I kind of taught myself. I when my dad was in the first Gulf War, and that's probably that was in like in 1990 or something, or 1992, and I took a chicken out of the freezer and tried to defrost it in the microwave to make a roast dinner for my mum. That was like one of the first times I tried to, and that was a disaster. That was the first time I tried to cook. And then when I went to uni, kind of I stepped it up a little bit and tried to you know, like cook, and then it just kind of evolved from there. And then when I moved back to Weymouth to go and work on a local paper in my early 20s, I'd get people round and cook big things of like curry goat, because I had friends up in London still, so I'd go up to see them all the time, go to my butcher, get goat, like what we used to do as kids. Like we'd go to London with my parents and stock up like on hardo bread and mango juice and like little ginger beer. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, like ginger beer, like almost like a cordial ginger beer essence in a little brown bottle that you kind of mix with loads of water and sugar, and so we'd stock up on stuff and take it back to Weymouth, where there was nothing. So I do the same and go and make like big curry goat for my friends and family, and that was it really. And I think like curry chicken, my grandma, that was the only dish that I kind of like observed her making because it was so good. Like Akin saltfish, like my dad taught me, like dumplings my mum taught me, and so yeah, like it's just, I've just been like a bit of a, I don't know, I love experimenting and I love cooking like lots of different things, and so it's just been a bit of a labor of love, and I'm not afraid to make a mistake in the cooking. In cooking, I think that's what a lot of people need to do, because like food very rarely like turns out so like you know, so badly you can't eat it. Like Kate and I think between us we've probably got about three examples of dishes that actually were inedible, but so what, you know.
Look, just to say for those of you with us, please put your questions out so I can put them to Melissa, who I'll be talking to. We're around for, we're supposed to be for 45 minutes, but we're happy to go on till about 8:15. So I've got some more questions, but yeah, please put your questions in the chat so we can have I can put them to her. You mentioned just really fleetingly about the first Gulf War and your dad. You know, and let's be clear, my God, in that situation, I would imagine he was in a minority. And the food, well, if you can call it that, I mean, that's, you know, quite dramatic. That just got slipped in. So I'm like, wow, was he the chef?
Well, no, so I mean, he was like, he worked on like on like the flight deck, and that was his job. But I've got photos of him because he buddied up with the Americans because they had good food.
Okay.
And so I've got photos of my dad like barbecuing out in Kuwait, or I can't remember exactly where he was. And yeah, like I'm putting on these big barbecues. Like, talk about resourceful. Like, you know, my dad was like, no, I'm not. And he brought a few of his ration packs home, and I was obsessed with them, like little bottles of Tabasco sauce and these like kind of pouches of food, and I used to eat them and just think they were amazing. My dad was out there kind of like barbecuing and stuff like that. Yeah,
very American. Chili Chilton said, I've been to Jamaica around 6 to 7 times, but my best experience of Jamaican food was in the UK and recipes from my neighbours. Okay, right. Where did you live, and who are they? It sounds like you were on a very, very good street. What were your favourite recipes, Chili? Actually, as well, right. What UK taste? What I want to check with you is what your favourite dish is, or more than one. Melissa, this is you. What's your favourite? Yeah. I know you've been raving about certain types of food recently. I think even Afghan. But what's your favourite? If you were forced to, you know, hopefully not a gunpoint, but a fake gun. And asked, yeah, what was your favorite dish to eat and what favorite dish to cook?
So I mean, I love to cook. I love barbecuing. I love doing stuff that's kind of low and slow. So yeah, like kind of the alchemy involved in that. I really like it. So give me a bit of I don't know, like a bit of brisket, or like I've got a nice jerk pork recipe in the book. And to eat, I don't know, like it changes all the time. Like, so my favorite restaurant right now is, it has been for a while, is Shishiru.
Okay.
I've spoken to you about that in Brixton, and that's run by Joke. My favorite place to get Jamaican food is at Maureen and Verner's, which is all like in between Brixton and Herne Hill, and she makes some of the best. She makes some of the best foods. Yeah, like her curry chicken is just like my grandma's. And like it always, I'd hate to pinpoint it down. I mean, I'm one of those people, if it's music and food, I'll just eat it until I can bear it no more, or listen to it until I can bear it no more.
All right, Denise, SW67 asks, when you shot the food for your book, did you come across any Black or people of color who were food stylists, food photographers? I mean, or did you seek them out and for your book?
So yeah, good question. So hey Denise as well, hiya. I actually, from the food stylist in my book was Benjamina Abui, and I requested Benjamina because I adore her aesthetic, and she's, you know, she said that she wasn't very familiar with Jamaican food, but you know, she's just got like an instinctive understanding of food and cooking, and you know, like the fact that she's Black kind of wasn't kind of forefront in my mind. Like her aesthetic was bang on, and the photographer was a friend of mine, Patricia Niven, and she's also like a sort of queer photographer, and then we had a queer white photographer, and then the prop stylist Jen. She's also a white woman, and their kind of aesthetic was really complementary, and so it worked out really well. Like I said, we had Melek as well, and she's like I say, she's a friend, and she's brilliant. And so like I think as far as shoots go, like I mean, like the food world in that kind of, like, you know, this whole kind of like the food stylist and prop stylist and stuff is very, very white. And I know there are people trying to kind of mix that up a little bit. I think, like, I know it's like sort of photographer Louise Haggard. She tries to, you know, had to have a directory of kind of, you know, sort of like photographers of color and people working, you know, like throughout kind of cookbooks and food shoots. The teams that you need to have, because the teams are massive, and you know, and again, it's this idea of like you know, in order to, it's experience, and I think people just automatically go to who they know, and this is what I hear all the time, and people go through, you know, they go to who they know. Those people invariably are white, and it's like they never want to take a chance on anyone, which kind of understandable, but actually they need to start taking chances, because you know, like a lot of people are talented, just not getting a look in, and then as soon as they prove themselves, which takes what, one or two goes, then they'll start getting work, and you know, something needs to be done to address that, like, desperately.
Oh, I love this. Mel's Place East. So Mum and I are sitting here listening with our sorrel tea that Melissa supplies us. What is your favourite?
I didn't realise you were there.
What is your favourite recipe with sorrel?
Hi,
just
Melek,
love sorrel. I've got something. I forgot I've got some in the cupboard. I better take it out actually, because I keep
lovely.
I got it at Christmas.
Well,
yeah. What's your favourite recipe with sorrel? Yeah.
So sorrel, hibiscus tea, hibiscus, as that's what Melek and her mum refer to. I forgive them for using hibiscus rather than sorrel. I like to drink it, and I think it's nice, like hot, and I think it's nice cold, and also I make a poached pear dish as well.
That's a good idea to replace red wine. Yeah,
which is good for people who don't drink. And I'm trying to think. Oh, and also sorrel and guava jam. These are all in the cookbook. Yeah, it's just that tang, and it's like it's really refreshing. It's like warming when it's hot, and it's like when it's cold, and it kind of have it like maybe like with a bit of vodka is actually quite nice.
I mean, Denise, SW67, says that she's been a food stylist for over 25 years. So, Denise, it might be worth your while getting in contact, if you're not already, with Melissa. I mean, if you've been doing this for that long.
Yeah, we are in contact.
Yeah, oh, you are. Look at that.
Yeah, no, I know
25 years, my God.
On the DMs.
But the thing is, I would imagine, though, because, the whole thing, when you think about Instagram when it first came out, people were just getting fed up with the fact it's the celebrities posting photographs of their meals. Do you remember? And, I mean, there's no excuse now because a lot of people, like that, I've found some fantastic bakers now. I've had cakes made by all these bakers of colour. There's some, and not just from London, It's a great platform for all these talented chefs and bakers and so on and cooks to let and food stylists that we're here, sorrel, someone's asking, is sorrel is not a Jamaican herb. No,
it's not the green British like you get here. It's the hibiscus flower, and it's the thing that covers the buds and it dries, and it's this beautiful vibrant red, and it's lovely.
And what was the biggest challenge in terms of putting the book together? And are you already thinking about your second one?
I guess the challenge was what to include and what to exclude, because I mean, we touched on it about nose to tail eating, and that's I talk about sort of cultural appropriation and this hierarchy. In Jamaica, people like manish water, cow foot, chicken foot soup. Like sort of eating extremities is written through Jamaican food. Look at Chinese food, and people, like I remember growing up and people like mocking Chinese food and Chinese people for like eating everything. And then in this country, you get brilliant chefs. They are brilliant, but they call it nose to tail eating. And then suddenly everyone's like, oh, yeah, can I give me the pig foot? And it's like, oh, is it all right now then? So it's okay.
Yeah.
Like now that white people are doing it, is that okay? That said, like my it was a challenge for me to know what to include in the book and how far to go with that, because I mean, whether to include things like manish water, whether to include awful heavy things like one about access, like, because everyone got like access to that, because you can like offal, the shelf life of it is so like it kind of goes off so quickly that to get it, if you don't live in a city, is quite hard. And so I haven't been able to include as much as I would. I've spoken about it, and I've spoken about how it's consumed. So that was a challenge. And there's so much in kind of the Jamaican repertoire that it's like, what do you include and what do you exclude? So that's probably the biggest challenge.
And right, so we've got Boko Loco Sussex, who said, how hard do you find it to make your mark in the industry being a woman? Because I find it so frustrating sometimes, as it's still so male dominated and oriented. Melissa? Well,
as you know, especially working in kind of live fire, it's very male dominated, and I think for me, I think because I never worked for anyone else in food. I was always doing my own thing. I've often felt that my colour acted, or my colour was more of a barrier than my gender. But I think in certain areas, people are still saying really stupid thing about women in food and their capabilities. And I think there's this assumption that I think you see this again, talking about hierarchies. I think when a white man says something, then it kind of it's taken as a given, and it's like, okay, there's no kind of questioning of it. If a woman says the same thing, then suddenly she's perceived to have less authority, and then throw like if that woman happens to be black, kind of it's like you're falling further and further down the kind of believability tree, and so I think like it is quite difficult. There are still barriers, but for me, I think I've been in quite a privileged position because I never had to work for anyone else, and Yeah, and I think what's happened in the last couple of years has made people actually kind of seek out different voices. So I think just like carry on, because you're very good at what you do.
But don't you think it's ironic though? And going back to that question, the fact that I think 90% of the chefs I have seen on television, wherever they're from, always attribute their success and their talents to their grandmothers, and yet somehow a woman has less value. I mean, you know what I mean? It's a bit like the hip hop thing about, you know, I love my mum, but I'm calling you a hoe.
Yeah.
You know, that you know, again about just the hypocrisy really, because they always said, I'd love, you know, my grandmother or my, you know, my mum had to work late or whatever, so I cooked all, but constantly, not grandfather, not dad, is predominantly grandmother. You know.
Well, yeah, I feel bad with my mum, because my mum sort of like, she sort of takes the mickey out of me, because like my dad cooked, my dad cooked to love, like out of love, and he loved it, and he did it on the weekends, whereas mum had to feed us, you know. And I understand this now as a parent. Like, my mum fed us throughout the week. You know, she went out to work and then she came in, and you know, and now I understand, because sometimes I'm just like, what do I cook? I mean, thank God for fish fingers, right? And she, you know, and like, and mum's like, what about my food, Melissa? When I talk about my dad, she's like, what about my food? My mum is an excellent chef. She's quite adventurous actually, and so sometimes when she's making fried dumplings, she'll put cumin seeds in there, and she's like, oh, she'll be like, can you tell what's in there, Melissa? And I'm like, is it cumin? She's like, and Dad's like sitting there going, cumin doesn't belong in fried dumpling. Like, why are you putting cumin in fried dumpling for? But it works. It's quite tasty. I
think a lot, because I've been using a lot of South Asian spicing when I do, you know, like my roast potato. Anyway, I'm giving my secrets away. But you know, my mum, you know, you've got to be able to cook, right? So now she goes, Joy, can you do your potatoes, right? And I let you cook back. So I'm pescatarian, and you know, they eat meat, but I'm pescatarian. But I blend South Asian spices, and I do it on the potatoes, and they just absolutely love it. And again, I just thought one day, I want to do something different with these potatoes. And I just think there's a lot of fusion that's going on without people realizing that it's fusion, isn't it? And I mean, we're exposed to so much condiments now, you know what I mean? It's like you say, trial and error. So look, if there's not any more questions, I'm going to ask Melissa just to tell us a bit more about how we can get help. The fish fingers has gone down really well. But so, you know, it's very exciting. It's out in September. I want that book straight away. I know the amount of people who'd want to read that. My parents, anything about Jamaica. She just sent me something through about the oldest woman alive at the moment is 117 and is Jamaican. So she sent it to me on WhatsApp, and she's just so excited. So I know that, you know, there's going to be a huge market for that, particularly the, you know, the juxtaposition between the recipes and the history, you know, because they know what they know, but there's a lot we still don't know. So how can people pre-order?
Well, you can go to Amazon, and it is actually like the pre-order hasn't been announced yet officially. Okay. But I did see that it is available for pre-order, and
nice.
And my mum accidentally ordered 4 copies. And she didn't tell my dad, and I was like, because she thought he was going to have a go at her. I was like, yeah, nice one, thanks, mum. And so yeah, so you can go to it's on Amazon. I think it's on WH Smith as well, probably like Blackwell's. If you order it from Blackwell's, you get like a little free paper marker, bookmark. That's what it's called.
Yes.
And it's not Amazon, but I mean, yeah, you can buy it. And also, the cover hasn't been released yet, but I think some of them might have a little sneaky preview of the cover.
I'm dying to see that. I can imagine. My God, the photographs or the archival photographs. I don't know if you know that you may have had access to at all to feature.
So it's a design front cover, and it's so the designer's called Anna Green, and she's based up in Manchester, I think. She's amazing, and I really wanted to have like leaves on the front, and to have kind of like you know, from cassava, and have like from ackee trees and things like that, and so that's what it's got, leaves on the front, and it's all the leaves are of Jamaican trees and
but it sounds like you had a lot of agency with this book, which is fantastic for your first book, though. It sounds like you had a lot of say, the intersectionality of the creatives on it, you know, and the fact that you know what the cover's not going to look like, rather it's show up and you're like, what? You know, so no, seriously, I've heard some horror stories. So look, we are coming to the end now. So look, on a Wednesday, to really dig deep to realize it is a Wednesday, because I have no clue what day of the week it is still. They're 2 years into COVID. But Melissa, it was great talking with you and seeing you again after all this time. And the book, again, for those of you who joined us late, is Motherland, The Journey of Jamaican Food. You can get it on pre-order, Amazon, WH Smith's. You know, support it. But I just think the title alone and just this conversation and Melissa's knowledge and passion is imperative enough to buy it. So look, everyone, have a lovely evening. Seek out your sorrel. If not, you know, there's loads of fantastic African and Caribbean shops. I'm in Walthamstow, you know, and markets. You know, do the markets, support local, and try out your dishes. All right. So look, thanks everyone so much.
Big love, Joy. Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Melissa, take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.